Welcome back to the deep dive. We're doing something a little different today.
Mm-hmm. A bit of a departure for us.
Yeah. Usually, we look at a broad topic, say AI or climate change, and we synthesize a whole bunch of pretty neutral reporting to just give you the lay of the land.
Right. We give you the consensus view, more or less.
Exact. But today, we're looking at a war zone.
A cultural war zone, to be very specific.
Right. And the trigger for this specific battle is, of all things, a toy company press release.
It sounds almost trivial when you say it like that, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
But we are talking about a collision between Hasbro, the Harry Potter franchise, and a very specific, very vocal corner of the internet.
And it's a fascinating case study. It really is.
Yeah.
Because it sort of peels back the curtain on how these modern corporate giants are trying and, well, often failing to navigate the culture wars.
So here's the setup for you. We have a stack of materials, primarily a transcript from a commentator known online as the Trent Report, along with some supporting articles.
And we need to be really, really clear about the nature of this source material before we just jump in.
Yes, absolutely. This is not the New York Times. This is not Reuters.
Far from it. The Trent Report, as a source, it represents a very, very specific world.
Okay, can you unpack that a little? What is that worldview?
Well, it's conservative, it's religious. Specifically, you can see a Catholic philosophy underpinning a lot of the argument, and it is deeply, deeply critical of what it terms woke ideology.
Right. So the mission for this deep dive, then, it isn't to say the Trent Report is right or, the Trent Report is wrong.
No, not at all. We are not here to endorse their politics, not in the slightest.
Our goal is to report impartially on their argument. We want to understand how this specific group sees the world, how they interpret corporate signaling, and frankly, why they think a board game deal is a sign of spiritual warfare.
Exactly. We are stepping into their framework for this hour. We're going to use their terminology, so you'll hear us use words like SJW, ideological capture, and the mob, because that is the language of the source text.
And we're doing that to decode the logic behind the outrage, not to adopt it ourselves.
Precisely. We want to understand the why.
Okay, so let's start with the news itself. The hook. What actually happened to kick all this off?
It started with a pretty standard press release from Hasbro. Now, Hasbro is a titan in the industry. I mean, they own Transformers, G.I. Joe, Peppa Pig.
Household names.
Absolute household names. And crucially for this story, they own Wizards of the Coast.
The makers of Magic, The Gathering, and Dungeons & Dragons. So the kings of tabletop games.
The absolute kings. Massive. And they announced a new expansive licensing deal with the Harry Potter franchise.
Okay, so what does that mean in practical terms? Just more toys?
Basically, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hasbro is going to make Harry Potter toys, a whole slate of board games, and, various other products. From a purely business standpoint, this is probably the most boring news in the world.
Right. Toy company buys rights to incredibly popular wizard. Money is exchanged. End of story.
That would be the end of the story, maybe in 2010.
But not now. In the current climate, linking anything to Harry Potter, it's complicated.
Radioactive is the word the source used. And it seems pretty apt because as soon as this deal dropped, the reaction wasn't, oh, cool, Harry Potter Monopoly set.
No.
No. According to the source, it was an immediate meltdown on social media. A firestorm.
The source mentions Blue Sky specifically. For our listeners who might not be terminally online, can we contextualize that platform a bit?
Sure. Blue Sky is a social media platform. It's a bit like Twitter, or X as it's now called.
Yeah.
It really gained a lot of traction as an alternative after Elon Musk took over Twitter.
So a lot of people migrated over.
A very specific group of people. In the view of the Trent, the source basically sees Blue Sky as a kind of refugee camp for the most progressive, left-leaning activists who fled Twitter.
An echo chamber, in their words.
Yes. The source portrays it as an echo chamber where these cancellation campaigns are born and where they gather momentum.
Okay, so in the source's narrative, you have this Blue Sky Brigade, as they call it, that sees the Hasbro announcement. What is their specific grievance here? Is it just that they hate J.K. Rowling?
That is the root of it, absolutely, yes. But the pressure wasn't just, a vague cloud of anger. It was applied very strategically.
How so?
They didn't just yell at the main Hasbro corporate account. They went after Wizards of the Coast.
The subsidiary. Why them specifically? Why not the Peppa Pig division?
Because the demographic overlap between people who play Dungeons & Dragons and Magic and people who are furious at J.K. Rowling is essentially a perfect circle, at least according to this source.
Okay, I can see that. It's a very progressive, very online community.
Extremely. So the activists immediately started demanding to know, does this new Hasbro deal mean we're going to see Harry Potter cards in Magic: The Gathering? Are you planning to put the transphobe wizard in our D&D game? in our safe space.
And how did the company react? I mean, usually these corporate giants just they put their head down and ignore the Twitter noise.
And that's the kicker. That's the whole crux of the issue. They didn't ignore it. No. Wizards of the Coast issued a clarification almost immediately. It was incredibly fast. They put out a formal statement.
Which feels defensive, but panicky.
The source argues it was absolutely a panic move. They really highlight the disconnect here. You have Hasbro, the parent company, saying, "We love Harry Potter. This IP is a gold mine. Let's make billions."
And then you have the subsidiary, Wizards of the Coast, simultaneously saying.
They're saying, "Please don't be mad at us. We promise we won't touch the bad lady's wizard. It's not coming anywhere near our game."
Wow. It does seem like a very mixed message. It's like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, or it's afraid of what the right hand.
The source calls it signal. They argue that the activists, the SJWs, or social justice warriors, to use the source's term, they got exactly what they wanted.
How?
They threw a temper can in the source's words, and the corporation blinked. They made a powerful company bend to their will in a matter of hours.
But let's play devil's advocate here for a second. Is it possible that Wizards of the Coast just genuinely didn't have any plans for a crossover? Maybe it wasn't a panic. Maybe it just truly wasn't on their product roadmap.
That is certainly a possibility, and it's the most charitable reading. But the source analyzes the tone and, more importantly, the timing. Why would you issue a statement about what you aren't doing mere hours after your parent company announces a massive, exciting new deal? It's like, Ford announces a partnership with Goodyear, and the Ford Mustang division immediately puts out a press release saying, "Don't worry, we will not be using Goodyear tires."
Yeah.
It's just bizarre.
It's preemptive damage control.
Exactly. And the source argues this reveals an internal culture at Wizards of the Coast that is terrified of its own, utterly terrified.
The source uses that phrase, ideologically captured, to describe the company. What does that actually mean in this context?
In their view, it means the inmates are running the asylum. The source suggests that the employees at Wizards of the Coast and their core customer base are so ideologically uniform, so woke, that the company can't make what would otherwise be a rational business.
Which would be to put the world's most popular wizard in their insanely popular card game.
Of course, a Harry Potter magic set would sell like crazy. But they can't do it, the source argues, because the internal and external backlash from their own progressive base would be too severe.
So the parent company, Hasbro, sees a gold mine, but the subsidiary, Wizard, sees a political land.
Precisely. And the source is very keen to point out that this is not an isolated incident. They frame this as just the latest skirmish in a years-long war of attrition against J.K. Rowling and her creation.
Which is a perfect transition, actually. This leads us into Section 2 of our breakdown, the history of cancellation attempts.
Right.
Because this didn't start with the Hasbro toy deal. This has been going on since, when did it really kick off?
Roughly, yes. It began in earnest when Rowling first publicly expressed her views on biological sex and gender.
And we should probably define those views, but specifically as the source defines them, just to be accurate to the text.
Good point. The source summarizes Rowling's position as simply a man is a man and cannot be a woman. They see her stance not as an attack, but as a defense of biological reality. And the source argues that because she crossed this specific ideological line, because she challenged what they call gender ideology, the activists have collectively decided that she must be
not just debated or disagreed with.
No, erased, canceled. Her work must be either boycotted into oblivion or, as we'll see later, captured and corrupted.
And they bring up the video game Hogwarts Legacy as the biggest example of this. I definitely remember that launch. It was chaotic.
Chaotic is putting it mild. The source describes it as a massive, coordinated global campaign to boycott the game. But they emphasize that the campaign went beyond a simple "don't buy this product."
It became something more aggressive.
Much more. It turned into "don't let anyone else enjoy this." It was about punishing people for having fun with the wrong thing.
They mention a specific website, I think, some kind of tracking site.
Yes, there was a website created with the sole purpose of tracking Twitch streamers who were playing the game. It was essentially, as you said earlier, a blacklist. And the source highlights this to argue that the activists engage in outright bullying. They tell the story of a female streamer who was harassed so intensely during a live broadcast that she broke down in tears and quit her stream.
Simply for playing a wizard game.
Simply for playing a wizard game. The source presents this as evidence of the mob's cruelty.
That would sound like pretty classic mob behavior. But here's the thing. The boycott was a total failure, wasn't it? I mean, the game sold, what, like 20 million copies?
It was the best-selling video game of the entire year. And the source absolutely revels in that fact.
Of course.
They use it as definitive proof that the Twitter mob is not the real world. They argue that normal, everyday people just want to fly on a broom and cast spells. They don't care about the online politics.
But the source also points out a really interesting irony about the game itself, which complicates that victory.
Yes, and this is where their analysis gets a bit more nuanced. They point out that Hogwarts Legacy, this game that was the target of so much anti-trans rage, actually included a trans character.
Right. Serona Ryan, the owner of the Three Broomsticks pub.
The very same. And the source finds this both hilarious and deeply tragic.
Why?
Because on one hand, the activists tried to burn the game to the ground, even though the developers had clearly made an effort to appease them by including representation. And on the other hand, it shows the anti-woke side that even when they win the financial battle, the culture might still be shifting underneath them.
So the source raises the question, does Rowling even have creative control anymore?
Exactly. It suggests that even when the anti-woke side wins at the cash register, the woke side might still be winning the cultural battle by inserting their messaging directly into the product.
It's that ideologically captured argument again, the idea that even if you buy the supposedly anti-woke wizard game, you're still getting woke content baked right.
Precisely. And they contrast this whole Hogwarts Legacy situation with another case study, the board game Codename. You know.
Oh, I love it. Great party game. Fantastic.
Well, the publisher, a company called Czech Games Edition. They had a Harry Potter version. They were preparing a new edition of it. And the Blue Sky Brigade, as the source calls, came for them.
And unlike the Hogwarts Legacy developers who kind of just stayed quiet and counted their mountains of money, Czech Games Edition, they responded differently.
They capitulated, is the word the source uses. They caved completely. They issued a very public, very groveling apology.
An apology for what exactly?
For the nebulous harm. And the source mocks that phrase relentlessly, for the nebulous harm that they caused simply by associating with the Harry Potter franchise.
Okay, so they apologized. And then, to make amends, they promised to donate a portion of their profits to a charity, right?
They did.
Now, usually donating to charity is the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card in a PR crisis. You say you're sorry, you write a big check, and everyone moves on. But the source absolutely hates. Why?
Because of where the money went. It's all about the choice of charity. The source argues that the organizations chosen are ones that actively promote gender ideology.
So, in their view, these are not neutral charities.
Not at all. They see them as political organizations, specifically ones that might support things like gender transition for minors or advocate for policy changes that the source fundamentally disagrees with.
So, from the source's perspective, the company didn't just lose a PR battle. They are now actively using customer money to fund the enemy.
Correct. The source frames it like this. We, the consumer, bought your family-friendly board game, and you turned around and used our profit to fund an ideology that we believe is actively harming children.
I see. That really reframes the stakes. It's not just business anymore, it's moral complicity.
That's the gravity they assign.
Okay, there was one more example they gave, Upper Deck, the trading card company. And this one involved a very specific activist tactic that I found really interesting, the yikes tactic.
Ah, yes, the weaponization of the word yikes.
It sounds so silly when you say it out loud. A weaponized yike.
It does, but the source makes, I think, a compelling point about how language functions on social media, especially in these pile-ons.
Walk me through it. What happened?
So Upper Deck announced a new Harry Potter product. An activist, someone the source identifies as a prominent gender ideology activist, quoted the announcement and just wrote one single
yikes. And the source unpacks that one word for like 2 full paragraphs.
But they do, because they argue that yikes is a very specific, very potent social signal. It doesn't make an argument. It doesn't present fact. It doesn't say Rowling is wrong because of X, Y, and Z.
It just signals disgust.
Exactly. It signals moral disgust. It says, this thing is socially radioactive, and if you don't recoil from it in the same way I am, then there is something morally wrong.
It's a shaming mechanism. It relies entirely on social pressure rather than any kind of logical persuasion.
That's it. It's an invitation to a pile-on.
Weird.
It urges the followers to share your disgust. The goal isn't to win a debate. It's to create a cloud of negativity so dense and unpleasant that the company just gives up to make the bad notifications go away.
It's compliance through exhaustion. Fine, we'll cancel the trading cards. Just please stop tweeting yikes at us all day.
And that brings us to the really human element of all. Because, you know, it's one thing to bully a faceless corporation like Hasbro, Upper Deck.
It's another thing entirely when you start going after individual actors,
Right. And for that, we need to talk about the new audience.
This is section 3 of the breakdown. I actually hadn't heard about this project until I read a full cast audio production of all 7 books. That sounds...
It's a massive undertaking. It's being planned to align with the release of the upcoming HBO series, and the cast they've assembled is incredible. I I mean, we're talking Ramid Kush, Jumbo Kid Harrington, Matthew McFadden, Hugh Laurie.
These are legitimate A-list stars.
Mm.
But I'm guessing that, as with everything else Potter-related, accepting the job came with a social price tag.
A very heavy one. The source describes the backlash as woke lunatics. Again, always their term, attacking these actors for betraying the cause.
And the logic of the activists is what? That if you take a paycheck from the Rowling machine, you are personally endorsing her views on gender.
That's the argument, that you are complicit.
Yeah.
That your participation lends legitimacy to her and therefore causes harm to the trans community.
And one actress in particular, Michelle Gomez, she actually responded to this backlash, didn't she?
She did. And her public statement serves as a really perfect specimen for the source to dissect and analyze.
It really is the Rosetta Stone of this whole conflict. Let's look at what she said.
Okay, so she put out a statement directly addressing her LGBTQ plus fan, and especially the trans community. She wrote, quote, "I hear you, and I understand why this is painful for many."
Okay, so far so standard.
Then she went on to affirm her stance as an ally and framed her decision to stay on the project not as defiant, but as taking accountability.
Now, to my ear, that sounds like someone trying very, very hard to be kind and empathetic. She's saying, look, I have a job, I love this story, but I don't want to hurt you. It's a peace offering.
To you, it's a peace offering. To the source, it is horrendous.
Horrendous. Why? What is horrendous about saying, I hear your pain?
Because the source argues that by apologizing, she is validating a false premise. Their entire worldview is that Rowling has done nothing wrong. She simply spoke the truth about biology.
So if there's no crime, there's nothing to apologize for.
Exactly. So if Michelle Gomez apologizes to the fans for the pain caused, she is effectively agreeing that Rowling is a villain and that working on the project is a sin that requires absolution.
So by trying to play both sides, by trying to appease the mob, she actually loses the moral high ground in their view.
In the source's eyes, yes, absolutely. They believe she should have stood her ground. She should have told the mob to pound sand, to use their phrase.
They see this apology as a sign of weakness.
Profound weakness.
Yeah.
They argue that you cannot appease a mob that demands total unconditional submission. Any apology is just seen as blood in the water.
And the source points out the ultimate irony, which is that Michelle Gomez almost certainly agrees with the activists politically.
That's the purity spiral that the source talks about. They point out that it doesn't matter if you're an ally. It doesn't matter if you vote the right way or tweet the right hashtag. If you touch the cursed object, in this case the Harry Potter IP, you're excommunicated. There is no nuance.
It's a stark picture, a really unforgiving one. But I want to go deeper on. We've talked about the boycotts, the yikes, forced apology. But section 4 of our outline is about the idea. The source doesn't just think these people are annoying online. They think they are operating under a specific and, in their view, dangerous world.
This is really the intellectual core of the Trent Report.
Yeah.
This is where they move from reporting on events to providing a philosophical diagnosis.
And they reference Bishop Robert Barron here, which gives you a big clue to the theological weight they're placing.
They group a whole bunch of different modern movements under the single umbrella of woke. So for them, woke includes critical race theory, queer theory, gender ideology, and surprisingly, feminism.
Whoa, hold on a second. Feminism. That seems counterintuitive. Usually the anti-woke crowd argues that trans activism is erasing women. You know, the whole debate about women's sports or women's space. That sounds like a defense of feminism. But this source says feminism is actually part of the problem.
This is a crucial distinction that the source makes, and it's central to their entire argument. They argue that modern feminism is actually the gateway drug to transgender.
The gateway drug.
They call it the slippery slope.
Okay, you have to walk me through that logic, because I think most people, especially people who are critical of trans act, see J.K. Rowling as a feminist martyr, not as a woke act herself.
Okay, so the source's argument goes like this. The fundamental premise of modern feminism, they claim, is equality, but they interpret that word equality to mean sameness, identicality.
Okay.
They argue that feminism has spent the last 50 years trying to prove that men and women are essentially interchangeable, that there's no real meaningful difference between them other than, some basic plumbing.
The old anything you can do, I can do better sort of line of thinking.
Right. And the source argues that once you accept that premise, that man and woman are just social categories with no essential metaphysical or spiritual difference, then you have already lost the argument against gender ideology.
Because if a woman is just a human with no distinct essential nature, then theoretically anyone can claim to be that kind.
Exactly. If gender is just a costume or a social role or a performance, which is an argument some feminists made to break down glass ceilings, then why can't a man put on that costume and say he is a woman?
So the source is arguing that Rowling is trying to stand halfway down a slide, that she herself helped.
That is a fantastic metaphor for it, yes. They're saying she wants to defend the category of biological women, but her own secular feminist worldview helped to erase the spiritual and essential distinction of womanhood decades ago.
That is a really fascinating, and I'm sure for many, a very controversial argument.
Oh, deeply. The source believes in what's called complementarity, the traditional Christian idea that men and women are equal in dignity, but are fundamentally immutably different in nature and purpose.
And because Rowling rejects that traditional view, because she's a modern, secular feminist, the source actually views her as part of the same disordered ideological spectrum as the very people who are attacking her.
They're just different points on the same slide.
So they will defend her against the boycott mob, but they absolutely do not accept her.
No, they are quick to point out that she's the one who retroactively made Dumbledore gay. To the source, that is woke. That is corruption of the text. So in their eyes, she's just a moderate woke person fighting with the more radical woke people.
This corruption idea, that seems to lead directly into their infiltration theory. The source argues that the activists don't actually want to destroy Harry Potter. They want to wear its skin.
That is a visceral way to put it, but yes, that's a very accurate summary of their position. The source argues that the ultimate goal here isn't to stop Hasbro from making toys. The goal is to force Hasbro to make different toys.
Different how? Like what?
Like what they did with the Magic, the Gathering Lord of the Rings set. The source brings this up repeatedly as a key piece of evidence.
What happened?
In that official licensed set, the character of Aragorn, who was originally described by Tolkien as a white man based on Northern European myth, was depicted in the card art as a black man.
Right, the race-swapping debate.
Exactly. And the source also mentions the new Mass Effect board game, including character pronouns on the official character sheet. They argue that the activists want to capture these massive, beloved cultural franchises, Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and inject their ideology directly into them.
To what end? What's the goal?
To normalize sinful, disordered behavior, to use their exact phrase, by associating it with heroic and beloved characters.
So the protest against Hasbro is a leverage play. The implied threat is, we will make your life a living hell until you agree to make Hermione trans.
That is the source's theory in a nutshell. It's a form of cultural conquest.
But surely, at the end of the day, these companies only care about one color, green. Section 5 of our outline is about the economics. We hear the phrase, go woke, go broke all the time. Is it actually true in this case?
The source says, absolutely not. And this is where they differ from some other anti-woke commentators who, seem to insist that all these companies are on the verge of bankruptcy.
This source looks at the numbers.
They look at the numbers. Hogwarts Legacy made $1 billion. The Harry Potter books are still perennial bestsellers on Amazon. HBO is dumping A King's Ransom into a decade-long TV show adaptation.
See, the boycott is basically a paper tiger.
Financially, yes. The source argues that the activists who claim Harry Potter is a net negative to a company's bottom line are either delusional or lying.
They mention a specific user on Blue Sky, right? A guy named Jared.
Yeah, poor Jared. Jared posted that he was quitting Dungeons & Dragons for good because he didn't want his money to enable the bad things in the world, meaning the Hasbro Potter deal.
And the source sees Jared as what?
The source calls Jared the canary in the coal mine, but in reverse. They argue that Jared is bluffing. They do not believe for 1 second that he is actually quitting D&D.
But it's just virtue signaling.
It's pure signaling. The source believes that even the most die-hard activists are addicted to these products. They scream in rage on Blue Sky, but they still buy the cards, they still watch the movies. Their boycott threats are hollow.
So Hasbro knows they can just ignore the noise and still make money? Is that the takeaway?
Well, the executives at Hasbro should remember Section 1. The source's argument is that the problem is the employees inside Hasbro, inside Wizards of the Coast, are the Jareds. The call is coming from inside the house. So the company is making these panic pivots, not to save money, but to keep its own ideologically motivated staff from revolting.
That brings us to the conclusion, Section 6. And honestly, this is where the transcript took a turn that I really did not expect. Started with toys, we went through gender politics and corporate PR, and now we are ending up in theology.
Moral philosophy, certainly.
Yeah,
he gets very deep. The source draws heavily on J.R.R. Tolkien at the end, specifically on the concept of the shadow and the nature of evil in his mythology.
Okay, you've got to break that down for me. How do orcs and elves relate to a Hasbro press?
Well, in Tolkien's writing, the shadow, which is his term for evil, for Sauron and Morgoth, it cannot create anything new. It has no creative power of its own.
Right.
It can only mock, twist, and warp what good has already created. Orcs aren't a new species that was created from scratch. They are tortured, corrupted elves.
And the source applies the same logic to the modern cultural acts?
They do, directly. They argue that the woke left has lost the ability to create new, beautiful, beloved culture. They can't write the next Harry Potter. Because in the source's view, their ideology is sterile. It is obsessed with deconstruction, criticism, and tearing things down, not with creation, beauty, and building things.
So because they can't create their own culture, they must colonize existing.
Exactly. They must take what already exists, what is already loved by millions, and skinwalk it, to use a rather dark term. They have to change Aragorn's race or Dumbledore's sexuality because that is the only way they can get their message into the bloodstream of the culture. They have to hijack the host organ.
That is a very dark view of cultural evolution.
It gets even darker. The source then pivots to a very direct spiritual argument about idol. They suggest that God is allowing this to happen for a reason.
Allowing the corruption of Harry Potter, why would he do that?
As a lesson. The argument is that we as a culture have turned these entertainment franchises into false religions.
Yeah.
We treat Star Wars canon like it's holy scripture. We treat going to a Marvel movie premiere like we're attending mass.
We derive our identity and our morality from being a Hufflepuff or a Jedi or a Stark.
We are worshiping false idols, correct? And the source suggests that the infiltration and corruption of these franchises is a divine signal to us to detach. If your idol becomes corrupted, if Star Wars becomes woke and unwatchable, then maybe the lesson is that you should stop worshiping Star Wars in the first.
It's a burn it all down mentality. If you can't save your favorite franchise, then let it rot and just walk away.
Which leads directly to the final call to action in the source material. The source doesn't tell its listeners to go write angry letters to Hasbro. They don't say, go yell at Wizards of the Coast on Twitter.
They say, pull a Tolkien.
The Lewis and Tolkien approach, as they call it. Make your own stuff.
The specific term they use is evangelium, right? Culture that evangelizes.
Yes, culture that points toward truth, beauty, and good. The Force argues that the era of the franchise is ending. These massive corporate-owned properties are becoming toxic battlegrounds that are designed to alienate half the population no matter what they do. So the only winning move is not to play.
Don't fight for custody of the child in the divorce. Just go have a new baby.
It's a stark way to put it, but yeah, create new stories, new games, new myth that are not beholden to Hasbro's shareholder or to Blue Sky's act. Build your own table.
It's a very empowering note to end on, but it's also an incredibly daunting one. I mean, it is a lot easier to complain about the new Star Wars movie than it is to go write your own epic opera.
Of course it is, but the source argues it's the only way to actually win the culture war in the long run. You can't regulate the woke away. You have to outcreate it. You have to build something more beautiful and more compelling.
So let's just zoom out for a final thought and synthesize all of this. We started with a simple press release about toys. But what we've really uncovered is a story about the collapse of the monoculture.
I think that's a great way to put it. We are seeing that you can no longer be a brand for everyone. It's impossible. You either offend the progressive activists by sticking with J.K. Rowling, or you offend the anti-woke crowd by apologizing and capitulating. The middle ground has completely evaporated.
And these massive corporations are stuck in that no man's land, just getting shelled from both sides.
Well, the source we've examined today suggests that the only sane response for fans is to just pack up their bags and leave the battlefield entirely.
It leaves the listener with a really provocative thought to chew on. We all sort of assume that things like Harry Potter or Star Wars will be around forever like cultural mountains. But if this ideological capture is as terminal and as corrosive as this source suggests, maybe we're not just watching a skirmish. Maybe we are watching the fall of Rome. Or, at the very least, the slow, painful fall of Hogwarts.
And the question that leaves you with is, what are we going to build in the room?
That is the question, and we'll leave you to ponder that. Thanks for diving deep with us today. This was a heavy one for sure, but hopefully it clarified some of the mechanics of the raid playing out online.
Keep thinking.